I'm Bill Cosgrove. I'm a pediatrician. Today I want to tell you one story, a story about one boy. I think you'll find that the story resonates in your own stories and resonates in your own life, maybe resonates in your own family. It's a troubling story. I expect to make you a little bit sad, a little bit angry, maybe you'll feel a little helpless, and yet I expect to leave you with a little bit of hope. The story is about one boy, Tommy. Tommy's a cute little boy, not yet 5. He lives alone with his mom. Dad left him a while ago. His mom struggles to get through the day. She struggles with fear, she struggles with anxiety, she struggles with depression. And she spends a lot of her time fearful that she's going to lose her job, fearful that she's going to be evicted, fearful that the food is going to run out before her next paycheck. The men she sometimes brings home, sometimes they're nice to Tommy, sometimes they yell and frighten his mom, hurt his mom. Mom sometimes uses drugs to escape her life, to escape her reality, to escape her fear. But this is Tommy's reality too. Tommy doesn't have any escape from that fear. His life is fear. And so when we're injured, when we're physically injured, we heal, but we heal with scars. When we're emotionally injured, we heal, but we heal with scars. And Tommy has some emotional scars. Now, just from Tommy's story, there's some things that we can do to give you an idea of what his future holds. His future now has increased risks. He's got an increased risk of 4.7 times more likely to abuse drugs when he's an adult, 7.4 times likely to be an alcoholic. He's 1.5 times more likely to have heart disease. He's 7 times more likely to be imprisoned, and he's 12 times more likely to commit suicide or attempt suicide. Now this is awful. How can I dare to predict his life? And this is not a prediction. This is just a calculation of increased risks of problems as an adult. So how do we know this? Well, I'm going to try to give you 23 years of research called the ACEs study. In 1995, Vincent Folletti of the Kaiser Permanente group in San Diego teamed up with Bob Anda of the CDC, and they were trying to figure out the correlations between child sexual abuse and adult medical problems. And they already were doing questionnaires. They sent out questionnaires to 17,000 patients. They already had the adult results of these. These were 50, 60, 70-year-olds, so they already knew what the outcomes were. And they asked 10 questions. They asked about all things that happened to these people before they were 18. Childhood, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, physical or emotional neglect, a family member who's dealing with depression, with mental health issues, a family member who's dealing with drug issues, a family member who's incarcerated, a parent who's missing because of death or divorce, or witnessing their own mother with being a victim of violence. And they added up these categories of scores to be the ACE score. Tommy's ACE score is 4. But just knowing that, and they already knew the results of these 17,000 patients, so they already kind of knew what these were correlated with. And what they discovered from their study was, first of all, these adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, are very common. 2 out of 3 of these respondents had at least one ACE score. 1 in 4 had suffered physical abuse, 1 in 5 had suffered sexual abuse, and 1 in 6 had 4 or more categories of abuse, like Tommy. Again, his ACE score is 4. They also discovered that the number of these adverse events correlated with how bad the results were. So here's one slide that shows alcoholism risk. If you have a score of 1, it doubles your risk of alcoholism as an adult. If you have a score of 2, it quadruples that risk. And if you have a score of 4 or more, like Tommy, it increases that risk by more than 7 times. What does this mean for Tommy? Well, this increases Tommy's risks a lot. And essentially, what the result of the study shows that he is at risk of physical problems, physical problems, emotional problems, and behavior changes. So what does it mean for Tommy? Well, just knowing that his risk is 4 increases his risk of by 1.5 times of heart disease or cancer. It doubles his risk of chronic lung disease or chronic liver disease. Emotional risk, it triples his risk of having severe depression as an adult, and we already mentioned it increases his risk of attempted suicide by 12. On the behavior side, you can think of high-risk behaviors as trying to lessen the discomforts of his life. And we already mentioned that it increased his risk of alcoholism and using alcohol to escape his discomfort, using drugs to escape his discomfort. It doubles his risk of using cigarettes to escape his discomfort. It doubles his risk of using sex to escape his discomfort. For Tommy, that means he doubles his risk of early onset sexual activity or teenage pregnancy, teenage paternity. We already mentioned that this increases his risk of attempting suicide by 12. It also shortens his lifespan by 20 years. Now this is all awful. This is all unbelievable. So how do we know this? Well, the researchers didn't believe this. I don't believe this. You don't want to believe this. So these studies have been confirmed over the last 20 years. Over hundreds of studies, millions of patients. It's been replicated in every state of our country and an additional 12 countries in the world. So this is close to truth. So now we mentioned that these emotional injuries to as a child have left him with risks of physical problems, mental problems, and behavior problems, multi-system injuries from emotional injury. This is the kind of thing we see with toxicity, with poison. If a child had lead poisoning, they would also have multi-physical system mental illness and decrease their immune response, so they're more vulnerable to cancer. So how does emotional injury in a child result in what looks like lead toxicity in the adult? And I'm going to give you 3 mechanisms that to try to make sense of this. One is the growth of the brain. The second one is how chromosomes are interpreted, how they're read. And the third one is the chemicals of the brain, the neuroendocrine system. First, on the growth of the brain. In the first few years of a child's life, the brain grows dramatically fast. At birth, the child's brain is no bigger than a lemon. It gets to triple that size in the first 3 years to about the size of a grapefruit. It quickly elaborates 1,000 billion neurons. Now, 1,000 billion is kind of a number that none of us think about. To get a sense of that number, picture all of the trees in the United States, from the Everglades to Alaska, 1,000 billion. And each of those neurons quickly makes connections to other neurons, synapses, and that's 1,000 trillion synapses. Now, that leaves this child with just this brain, this wonderful brain, almost miraculous cluster of possibilities and unlimited potential. Except then the harsh reality of biology happens. The cruel rule of biology is use it or lose it. So in the course of this child's childhood, by the time he finishes his adolescence, he's going to lose about 1/3 of those neurons, pruned away as useless, gone. He's going to lose about half of those synapses, again, pruned away and gone. Now, that changes the outcome. Now, you don't get to choose which neurons you want. You don't get to choose. Essentially, the rule of biology is if you use it a lot, you keep it. So the nerves that he keeps are the ones he uses the most. So if our Tommy gets exposed to a lot of language, rich language by his mother, then the nerves for language get stimulated and grow and prosper. Other nerves die off. But if Tommy's mom is distracted by her fear and her depression and doesn't talk much, some of those language nerves get lost. That affects Tommy. If Tommy spends a lot of his time in fear, the nerves for fear get stimulated and grow and prosper, and other nerves get lost. When you realize this affects almost everybody in our society, it affects our family members, it affects 2 out of 3 of the people in our society. And so then you have to look at, what does this mean for Tommy's future? Is he doomed to live a life of physical and emotional problems, behavior problems? Is he doomed? Well, no. These are statistical risks. And to get a sense of that, let me picture a field, a big field like a soccer field for Tommy to run on and play on, do cartwheels on and grow on and live his life on. But now Timmy's soccer field has been war-torn. It's been bombed. There are now potholes to trip him and craters to fall down and shrapnel to cut him, and even unexploded bombs still there to risk his life. Yes, he can get across this field, can live his life without mishap, but the odds have changed. The risks are increased. So what do we do as a society? Again, this affects everybody in society. What I've just told you affects 7 out of 10 of the most common causes of death in our society. We have to deal with this. And so if you know a child who is struggling or an adult who's struggling, the first thing to do is listen. You can ask a question, but the question isn't, what's wrong with you? The question is, hey, gently, what's happened to you? And if you just ask and you just listen and you just accept their story, their life story, that is by itself therapeutic. Now, the best protection against this is prevention. Prevention is the best thing for all public health problems. And the way to think of prevention here is we need to nurture those children. And when a child is born, they need someone to respond. So when this baby reaches out, somebody needs to be there to reach back. When this baby coos, somebody needs to be there to coo back. Somebody needs to be there to smile back. Just responding to the child's acts, the serve and return, just responding to their acts gives them a sense of power that they have an effect in their life. It helps them to learn some self-calming. Now, Tommy's mom can't do this alone. She's been traumatized by herself, and so she can't bring these skills to this child. So we, the community, have to do that for her. We have to nurture the nurturers. We have to give them the love and care that they can use to nurture and protect our children. Thank you.